this podcast, Dickson Tang, author of the book Leadership for Future of Work, talks about 3I framework. So stay tuned. Welcome everyone to Jobs of Future podcast. Today we have with us Dickson Tang, and here's a brief bio. So Dickson Tang is an author of Leadership for Future of Work book, Ways to Build Career Edge Over Robots with Human Creativity. He helps senior leaders build creative and effective teams in preparation for the future robot economy. Dickson is a leadership idea expert focusing on how leadership will evolve in the future of work. 15 plus years of experience in management, business consulting, marketing, organizational strategies, and training and development. Corporate experience with several leading companies such as KPMG Advisory, Gartner and Netscape. Dickson's expertise on leadership, creativity, and future of work have earned him invitations and opportunities to work with leaders, professionals from various organizations such as Cartier, CITIC, Telcom, DHL, Exterran, Hypertherm, JVC, Kenwood, Manayam Business School, Mont Blanc, and others. He lives currently in Singapore. Dickson, with that, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here, Vishal.
So that's fast. I think I like the title of the book, by the way. It's very clever. Leadership for Future of Work. So kudos to you on that. So let's talk about your journey. So if you can walk us through your background and enlighten us with where have you been and what have you achieved, and that will be amazing.
Yeah, happy to do that. I came from a business consulting background, so I help organizations improve their operations, strategies, business research, and so on and so forth. So that was what I do in the past 10 to 15 years. In the recent 5 years, I was heavily involved in training, facilitation, and speaking, helping organizations to improve through training, facilitation. So I'm very much a human person. I'm a people consultant. So I love working with people rather than with numbers and spreadsheets. So I must admit that, okay, I'm more like a people person. So that's why I love to interact with people from different industry, from different sectors, and understand what's going on in different sectors. And why I write this book is primarily three reasons. The first reason is I spend a lot of time interacting with different professionals, but what I noticed that is some of them, they actually focus too much on the present. That means they only think about this month, this quarter, or even this week. So they fail to really think about the long term. So they fail to look at the strategic stuff, but they focus on the current stuff. Okay, so that's reason number one. Reason number two is according to research from this World Economic Forum, almost 7.1 million of jobs, will be gone by 2020 because of the automation and robotization. So that's a reason number two why I want to write this book, because that is something really alarming. And thirdly, personal reason why I wrote this book is because since young I got this dream of writing my own book. So in combination of these three reasons, number one, professional reason, number two, the alarming trends, and number three, personal reasons. So that's how this book, Leadership for Future of Work, 9 Ways to Build Career Edge Over Robots with Human Creativity, was born. So,
interesting, fascinating, by the way. So what brought you to this world of learning and development? So what enticed you to sort of focus your professional time in researching and helping executives around that?
Sure. As I mentioned to you, when I first started in my career, I was in the business consulting. So I look at business process, I look at business numbers, the spreadsheets, modeling, process improvement. So I work with a lot of numbers, figures, statistics, processes, and things like that. And then I realized that as time goes by, I realized that actually my passion is actually with people, I enjoy working with people, interacting with people, talking with people, having coffee or having drinks with people. And in general, people find that I'm a friendly person. I am a person can engage conversations. So I know that, oh, okay, that is my that's my sweet spot. So I really want to like work with people. And at the same time, I also want to leverage on my background as a consultant. So, so I want to talk to people, work with people, but at the same time, add value to people with ideas, with strategy, with some advice. So then I realized that, oh, training and development is actually one of the great areas for me, because number one, I can talk, I like to read, and I like to add value to people, and I want to make an impact to people. So yeah, I think that is a perfect sweet spot for me.
Interesting. So fascinating, by the way. And so now when you come up with this idea of let's write a book around the leadership, around solve that, tell us, walk us through the journey of the moment when you say, okay, let me write that book, to the journey when you started writing, and if you can, whatever you can share about this inception of getting to a book. We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Oh, sure. Typically, I start off with some rough notes on like something I want to write. So the entire journey, it takes about 9 months to write a book. But I would say I'm not writing every day diligently. Although I wish I could have like written in a more regular basis, but all in all, it takes about 9 months. So so typically I break it into a 3-step process. First is about the conceptualization and research. So basically, I just use maybe like a legal pack, just jot down some ideas, or even on the computer, just jot down a few ideas. So so that's the first one, is about like the conceptualization. The secondly is actually the actual writing. So the actual writing means I really need to type things into the computer, and I'm using a software called a Scrivener. The Scrivener is a writing software. I find it quite handy, quite useful for this process. So that's the second process. Then the third process, of course, is the editing, the production, the actually making the book ready. Okay, so I would say number one, conceptualization. Number two, the actual writing. The number three is the editing and production. Okay, then of course after that, okay, will be marketing. Okay, but that will be another story. So I think for those people who are interested to write a book or publish a book, so I think this 3 steps process works pretty well for me, and I think it will work pretty well for other people as well.
Interesting. And when you write a book on, say, leadership for the future, tell us about your research, like what all research you did to get to the book.
Oh, sure. In terms of research, typically I'm doing 2 types. One is more like internet research or desk research, looking at some of the trends, some of the numbers, statistics. So that is part of the research. The other part of the research is I talk to industry people. I connect with other people on Twitter, so I get their points of view. So it will be a mixture of so-called desk research as well as interview and interaction with people. Okay, now that is the research part. Okay, after I do all this research, then I need to put all this content into a framework. Okay, I consider that I'm very lucky. I managed to put all this content, organize all this content into a framework. Okay, I call it the 3I framework. Okay, I can share with you later on this 3I framework. But I think research is about one thing, but how can you present your research finding in a step-by-step structural manner? That will be equally important. So I think research as well as organizing the research, both are important.
Interesting. And I think one thing that I recall from my journey of authoring a book was, so I think when I started with this idea of, hey, I have to write a book, say, on data-driven organizations, and when I started doing research and writing about it, there are like bunch of aha moments when I realized, oh wow, I've never anticipated that. Like when I thought about writing this book, I was not thinking about sort of some of the revelations that I ended up sort of scoring. Do you have such revelations in your journey of writing this book?
Okay, sure. In terms of aha moment, I think there are two. Okay, one is in the earlier part of the writing process. So I think I gathered too much information, too much content, and you know, as a writer, you're writing a book and you gather all this research, you gather all this content. You don't want to throw it away. That is. It takes some courage for you to really, okay, for the purpose of this book, I need to throw away certain content, or I need to pick certain essential content and leave out certain content aside. That means that's a hard decision because typically as a writer, you are a bit greedy. You want to like cover as many points as possible, but there's also a danger of doing that because the more you write, if you include a lot of like not so relevant stuff, then the gist of the book is gone. Okay, so I think one of the aha moment is okay, less is more. Less is more. Okay, it sounds cliche, but it's true. That means less is more. That means you have to know how to throw away some of the content. Okay, so that's first aha moment. The second aha moment came at the later part of the writing process. Is originally, I tried to write something about leadership, about creativity, and also about the trends. But I have a hard time organizing that together in a meaningful way. Then after a while, I read an article from Kevin Kruse, the thought leader in US, Kevin Kruse, and he suggested, okay, whenever you write a book, try to map that book into a bigger trend, or into a bigger theme. Oh, that's the aha moment came in. Is oh, okay, I'm now writing about leadership. I'm writing about creativity. I'm writing a whole bunch of things. How can I tie all this into one central theme? And then that's how the future of work, and that's how the central theme start to emerge. So that's aha moment, and I have to give credit to Kevin because that is how I managed to organize everything into one central theme. So that's the two aha moment. Okay, first aha moment, less is more. Second aha moment, organize it into a central theme.
I think that's I think kudos to you. I think one of the things that I had a similar experience with at least the first part, where sort of I want to tell to the listener and viewers that when you're writing a book, you have, and I think you painted it beautifully. I reminded of my nightmares of removing something that you really like to put somehow, but you just don't have room for that. It's how much difficult it is than you think, because when you're writing a book, you have a, like, in some ways you have a blank sketch, and on the other side, blank canvas, and on the other side you have your own sketch that you want to create. And then when you research, you find amazing golden nugget of contents, and pretty much you can write like 3 books out of that. Like many times in the journey, you can think, hey, maybe part 2.0 or 3.0 of that book, but you just have to disregard the whole thing because it's not fitting in to the final narrative. So I think it's thank you for sharing that. That's a fascinating sort of observation. So now let's talk about the book, right? So you talk about so what is the underlying theme behind the book, if you can walk us through that. We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Sure. So the underlying theme, it is simple. basically is in the future of work that requires a new way of leadership. And this new way of leadership is about creativity, because creativity is an area that humans will have an edge over robot. Okay, so that's the central theme. Okay, so the central theme is in future of work, it requires a new way of leadership. And what's the focus area? The focus area should be on creativity, because that's the area humans will have an edge over robots. And robots will be able to do a lot of like programmable tasks, routine tasks, but what is left to the human will be the ability of human being to create something new, to think out of the box, to innovate. So that's the key theme of this book.
Interesting. And what is your definition of creativity? Like, what do you define as creativity?
Oh, that many people define creativity differently. Okay, but for me, it is the ability to think out of the box, and also the ability to come up with new ideas. Okay, now of course some people will say, oh, there's a term called innovation, right, which is more about the application of ideas. Okay, but for me, creativity is about your ability to think out of the box, and also your ability to come up with new ideas. Okay, so I know some innovation folks will talk about like how to apply, how to apply the application of ideas. But for me, it will be about like how to think out of the box, and also how to come up with new ideas.
Interesting. So let's get into the book now. So from your vantage point, so what is the definition of a leader that is actually using creative edge, as you're saying, to stay relevant, or at least to make their organization stay relevant? What are the tenets, or what are the qualities of those individuals?
Sure. As a leader, your job is to influence others, right, to achieve whatever organization objective or business unit objective. So leadership is primarily about influencing people. Okay? But in the future of work, okay, the traditional way of influencing the traditional organizational hierarchy is gone. Okay, is gone. So that means you need to have a new way of like motivating people and influencing people. And why creativity will come in here is, in order to motivate your team, in order for you to influence your team members, you need to use a more humanistic approach, okay, rather than the traditional approach. So, and as a leader, it is your job to bring out the creativity of your team members, right, so that you can achieve your organizational objective faster and better. Okay, so I think essentially, as a leader in the future, okay, you need to bring out the creative elements of your team members. Okay, so that is something I am encouraging all the leaders to do, is to really bring out the creative elements of your team members.
Interesting. And how much would you give weight to the culture of an organization towards this sort of creative mindset of a leader?
Sure. Culture plays a part, definitely, and in fact, one of the key themes in this book, I talk about the concept of infrastructure. Right? If you want to be creative, right, you need to make sure that your creative infrastructure is there. So the infrastructure includes your team structure, your organizational culture, the way you do things, the way you work with your team members. So how important is the culture? Yes, culture plays a part here in terms of your creative infrastructure, but also how you structure your teams, how you interact with your internal team and external teams. Those are also important.
Interesting. And do you have some of the case stories that you could share where sort of some of the leaders have really helped an organization with this new mindset, or with this actually creative mindset?
Oh, sure. In terms of creative mindset, what I have done is in my book is I I talk about it under the first I, which is about the individual mindset, the first I, individual mindset. So in terms of as a leader, okay, what you can do is you can try to create an creative individual mindset for yourself and also for your team members. Okay, so as a leader, in order for you to create this creative individual mindset, what you need to do is you need to encourage your team, okay, to think different. Okay, that means you need to think like a startup. Okay, you have to think about possibility. Okay, you need to think about growth, right? So you need to firstly you need to help your team to think different. Secondly, you need to help your team to think uncertain, to embrace uncertainty. And the third one is you need to think about being open to new ideas, being open to new collaboration opportunity. So in terms of the individual mindset, okay, you need to do three things. I call it the DUO. You need to think different. You need to think uncertain. That means you need to embrace uncertainty, and also you need to be open for ideas and collaboration.
Interesting. And I think so some of the things that you said, so being different, okay, sure, I'll take that. Uncertain and open are some things that even are tied to the culture of an organization. So if the culture, say, I think I've heard it, maybe you have also heard it from a lot of executives, that the companies are very regulated industry, or they're not very open to ideas, that they have a very sort of set mindset and what and what not. If you are a leader stuck in that cultural heavy organization which doesn't grant you these three liberties, what is the way out, and what do you suggest to those sure. leaders? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I always believe that the first step towards creativity, it all starts with your mindset, your individual mindset. So I take a more like an inside out approach. So that means if you want your team to be creative, firstly you have to learn how to be creative. So so that's the first I, right? The individual mindset. So you have to develop a creative individual mindset. The first I. The second I cover in the book is about the infrastructure, which is exactly what you mentioned, Vishal, is about the culture, the team structure, and all this. And then thirdly, okay, the third I is about ideas, right? How you can come up with ideas very quickly and very rapidly. But at the same time, you need to know how to distill all this idea into some actionable items. Okay, so if you ask me to summarize the entire process, what you need to do is, as a leader, if you want to be creative leaders in the future, firstly, you need to work on your first I, which is about individual mindset. Then you work on your second I, which is about the infrastructure. Then the third I is about the ideas generation and ideas management. Okay, so these are the three I's.
Interesting. And so if I'm an individual and I'm sort of I want to be future proof, like I want to future proof my career. So tactically, how should I really start this journey? Like what? So sure, there's an individual, there's an ideation, there is a. So how do you see me? Like, what are the steps that you could suggest that I would take from just being whatever I am to sort of very creative mindset leader?
Sure. Yeah, I think I will break it down into a 3-step process. Each step corresponds to one of the I's I talk about in this book. And firstly, the first step is always about the individual mindset. That means you probably need to make a conscious effort, okay, to drop some of the traditional thinking. So, for example, maybe you work in a traditional organization environment which features the command and control. Right? So you need to make an effort to I need to think in a new way, which is something like a startup. I need to look at possibility. Okay, so I would say having the individual mindset is the first step, right? And for some people, the first step is very simple. Could be just like, oh, stop saying cannot, or stop saying cannot be done. Okay, to say why not. Okay, why not? So you need to shift your mindset from shift from cannot to why not. Right? So that's the first thing you need to do, is to work on your individual mindset. And the secondly is you need to work on the infrastructure. So if you are managing a team, how you manage your team, how you encourage your team members to speak up, okay, that is something you need to learn under this infrastructure. Okay, so that's the second step. Then the third step is you need to encourage yourself and also encourage your team members, right, to come up with more creative ideas. So it's about the ideas generation process. And in the traditional management or in the traditional leadership space, a lot of times good ideas are being suppressed because of the leaders' behavior and also because of the team infrastructure. Right? So in the book, I actually have some tools that can help leaders and team members, right, to do more divergent thinking so that they can come up with some ideas more quickly. Okay, so to answer your question, what are the exact steps you need to follow? I would say follow these 3 steps. First, work on your individual mindset. Second, work on your infrastructure. And thirdly, work on the ideas.
So about the third stage, ideas, like what exactly is that? So is that ideas that I create, ideas that someone else create? What is, if you can sort of explain the third stage a bit more?
So let me talk to you more about the ideas part, the third I, right, which is about idea. So in terms of ideas, okay, if you want to be creative, okay, so you have to come up with a lot of ideas, right? Be it in a brainstorming exercise or be it in a brainwriting exercise. So your objective is to come up with as many ideas as possible, right? Some of the ideas might not be that practical, but it doesn't matter. The key is divergent thinking. So we want more ideas. The more ideas, the better. Okay, so that is what you are supposed to do, right? Under this ideas process, you need to have as many ideas as possible. But after you have all these ideas, okay, you also need to have a system and method, right, to distill all these things into some relevant and practical ideas. Okay, so you need to know what are the criteria. You need to distill all these ideas so that you will have a funnel, right? So that the great ideas will drop out from this funnel. Okay, so that's why in terms of ideas, a lot of people may think that, oh, it is quite easy to come up with ideas, but actually it's not. Okay, because coming up with ideas is just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is you need to know how to select the right ideas. So you need to have both.
Interesting. Actually, that's a very creative perspective, by the way. So if we talk about this 3I framework, individual, infrastructure, and idea, is the sequence relevant? Like which particular I comes first and which I comes later?
For this creative 3I model, okay, which features number 1, individual mindset, number 2, infrastructure, number 3, ideas. If you ask me, is there an ideal way to go for it? I would say you start with yourself first. I would say start with your individual mindset first, then move on to infrastructure, then move on to ideas. Okay? So for some people, I know they feel more comfortable in this sequential process. If that's the case, I would say start with individual mindset first, then go to infrastructure, then go to ideas. Having said that, okay, all these 3 components actually they interact with one another. Okay, so so I would say if you are a sequential person, I would say you start with individual mindset first, then go to infrastructure, then go to idea. But if you're not that sequential, okay, you can address each one of these using your own preference. So it doesn't matter. So there's a two preferred methods here. Yeah.
Interesting. And if suppose if I'm a business, right? If I'm a business and obviously I have been business with as I work on my previous hypothesis that I have a very thick culture and not very open towards ideations, not very open towards sort of creating this sharing mindset. How should I crack this? How could I adopt this 3I framework? Like, what are some of the things that you could suggest to a business, that how could they sort of execute this? Sure, as an individual, I can clean myself up, I can dust myself off, and then I can say, okay, at least I am that guy. But if I need to create a process, if I'm a leader in an organization, I want to make my organization more open, and what are some of the things you could suggest?
Okay, sure. I think in this case, okay, I would suggest you start from yourself, and also start from your immediate team members. Okay, you don't need to aim to create a creative culture instantly overnight for maybe 300 people. No, that's not possible. But you start with your immediate team. So what you can do is you start with your immediate team, maybe just a team of like maybe 5 people or 10 people. Just take them out to do something different. Okay, so for example, right, if every day your team, okay, eat in the cafeteria inside your company, right, try to do something different. Bring them out for lunch in an external place, or bring them for a museum trip, or bring them to an outdoor picnic. Just do something different from your traditional regular workplace, so that people will be able to loosen up. Okay, once people are able to loosen up, okay, they will start to talk and give you more ideas. So as a leader, okay, you need to listen. Okay, so in all these informal gatherings, you will be able to listen. Okay, what are their frustration about this job? What are their frustration about the team process? What are the frustration about the business unit? So from there, you will be able to understand, okay, what are the painful process, or what are the frustrations? And then from there, you will be able to see, okay, which angle will be your best way for you to bring in this like creative 3I model. Okay, so for example, if you're a leader and you hear from your team members saying that, oh, it's about the team process that sucks, and this team process is really frustrating, okay, then you know that, okay, you need to pay more attention to this second I, which is about the infrastructure, right? How you can reorganize your team, how you can get your team to think more fluidly. Right? So that is providing you an angle, right, to implement this 3I. On the other hand, okay, let's say if your team members, they tell you that, oh, it is about our ideas not being heard or being addressed properly, or if they complain to you that, okay, they feel stuck about the ideation process, then you know that you need to work on your third I, which is about the idea. So probably you need to like relook at the way how you brainstorm ideas. You need to relook at the way how you process and manage all these business ideas. Okay, so to answer your question, I would say the first step is like help your team to loosen up by bringing them out to do something different, right, so that they will be able to tell you what are their frustration, and then from there it will provide you an angle, so that you can implement this 3I.
Interesting. And so is there any success criteria for each I? Like, do you say, okay, if I'm doing something, and then is there any criteria where say, okay, if you're doing say X, Y, and Z, then probably you're doing it right, otherwise you're doing it wrong. So is there any success
Sure.
or gauge that I should be figuring it out?
Sure. There's no such checklist or score sheet, okay, in the traditional sense, because I believe that, okay, creativity is something more qualitative rather than quantitative. So this is not exam, this is not a quiz. So I don't have a very rigid set of criteria. Okay, but if you look at my book, and in my book, it is organized in this 3 core area: the individual mindset, the infrastructure, and ideas. And in fact, for each of the theme, okay, there's a couple chapters around that. Okay, so if you go through this book and you read through each of the chapter, and you just take off all the ideas that we present in all this chapter, more or less you will be doing okay. So I don't have a so-called exam questions or quiz or score sheet for you. But if you go through all this book and you take off all these actionable ideas, you are pretty much good to go.
Interesting. And what other thing I can think about in an organization, there's some sort of teams or some groups who are slightly more flexible into what they do, and there are some teams and groups in the organization which are very tied down to the process because they are adhering to regulations, their guidance, a lot of things given where there's not too much wiggle room where they can sort of innovate and invent themselves. So what are your thoughts in your research? Have you done any research on organization where this particular model fits better than the other? Like, do you have some comparisons that you could share?
Oh, sure. I I totally recognize that for certain industry, they place a lot of they place a lot of focus on compliance. That means you need to make sure that you do things in certain processes and things that I totally respect it. I totally respect that. But the essence of creativity can be applied in these types of like highly regulated, highly compliance focused industry as well. Um, Now, I'm not asking you to change the rules overnight, but as a team or as a leader, okay, you need to look at all this compliance requirement. Okay, why? Okay, what's the reason of this compliance requirement? Okay, can you think of a new way of doing all these compliance requirements? Maybe in a different manner. That means that you might need to do certain things in a different order, different sequence, still addressing all this compliance concern, but at the same time, you can get your job done faster and better. Okay? So that is also an expression of creativity. Okay? So creativity for those highly regulated industry, I would say it is about like how you can understand the why of compliance, and is there a way that you can address all this compliance requirement but in a different manner. Okay, so in those industry, yes, I think still creativity can be applied.
Interesting. And what are some of the like interesting interesting verticals in an organization where you actually have seen folks actually doing some fun stuff? Like, do you have any stories to share from your
Sure.
research?
Sure. Um, Through my research, there's one company in US. Okay, what they have done is something very interesting. The HR people, okay, in when they do recruitment, they don't do the recruitment in a traditional way. Okay, they do recruitment at pubs, restaurants, and shopping malls. Okay, so now you think about it. If you tell your HR people, hey, we are going to do a recruitment, talent recruitment, and you don't need to post it on LinkedIn. You don't need to post it on jobstreet.com. You don't need to look for headhunters. Right? You just need to go with me. Go to shopping malls, pubs, and restaurants, and you will be able to find talent. Okay. Then if you talk to HR people, they will say, "Hey, are you nuts?" Okay, but actually, that's something happening in a company in US. They actually invite the HR leaders go down to the shopping malls and restaurants and try to identify talents. So, for example, they hire waiter and waitress, and they turn them into an online mortgage banker. Okay, you think about it, right? Waiter, waitress, and plumber. Okay, those people, they are in a total different industry compared to online mortgage banking. Okay, uh, but why HR did that? Because the philosophy is okay. We can train you technical skills, but in terms of your personal quality, your politeness, your willingness to help your customers, your courtesies, all these kind of things, right, cannot be trained, right? So that's why the HR go to shopping malls, pubs, and restaurants. They try to hire people based on desirable personal attributes rather than the technical skills. Okay, so they hire them in, and then they give them training, and then they manage to turn waiter, waitress, and even bumpers into very successful online mortgage bankers. Okay, and this company is called Quicken, the online financial software company, Quicken. So so that's an amazing example because you may think that doing a recruitment in pubs and restaurants, right? This is really really off the traditional mindset of HR. Okay, so if you ask a traditional HR people, right, where to do recruitment, they will tell you the online and offline channels and methods, right? But actually bringing the HR team out to some unusual places, actually it works very well.
Interesting. So fascinating example, by the way. I think that's sure, kudos to them. They actually nailed it off. I think one thing that if I wear my consulting hat, right, and if I look at businesses, I see businesses, typically I see businesses in three buckets. So I call it jungle gym, off-road, and highway. So once you are jungle gym very early, I don't know where the product market fit is, a lot more flexibility. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. When you talk about off-road, it's like, okay, I know the product market fit and I'm scaling it. So I'm trying to sort of work on the scale. So the more money I put in, the more money I get back. And the third is the highway. Sure, it's so fast, it's running. I don't have, like, I cannot do left and right. I don't have too much wiggle room where I can do things. So once sort of, I see businesses who are in either off-roading is still okay. Once they're on highway mode or once they're in off-roading mode, they are less responsive to ideas. Because they know, okay, this is the math. That math is at play. It's still working, and we're getting what we are getting, right? So now communicating this message to those organizations, they'll be saying, okay, no, we have things in place that are working, fascinating for us. Look at our stock value. Things are working great. How would you convince them to be having an open mindset and sort of this idea of 3I, or like how would you approach those organizations from this framework perspective?
Oh, okay, sure. I totally agree with you. And typically, when you're first starting, you tend to be more creative because at that point of time, you didn't have that much like marketing budget or business budget. So you have to think out of the box. But as your business scale and into this octo-link, right, you tend to be complacent. You tend to be very happy with your current business. And my suggestion for those people who are in this like a scaling up mode and also in this octo mode is two things. Okay, number one is try to go back to square one or square zero from time to time. Okay, so no doubt, okay, you are very successful in your current market with your current product, but always from time to time, right? Maybe spend a half day, go back to square zero. So assuming that you are now back in the square zero. Okay, what would you do, or what would you do differently? Okay, so this is my first suggestion: is always try to return right to the step one or step zero. The second ideas I can share with you is try to get your team members to talk to people from different industry. Of why? Because you are in this industry and you are enjoying the growth, you are enjoying the scaling up, everything is on optimal, revenue coming in like quite steadily and happily, then you tend to be quite complacent. And sometimes you might not know that the risk is actually coming from other industries. So I always tell people that, if you're not thinking outside, you are thinking inside. Okay? Thinking inside hurts you because most of the opportunity and most of the risk actually come from outside. Okay, so I this will be my two suggestions. Number one, try to go back to the square zero from time to time, and number two, try to meet with people from other industries so that you can think from the outside and not thinking entirely inside.
Interesting. Interesting. So I think and to add to your point, I think I whenever I talk to any company any employee from a company who has actually filed for bankruptcy, you all like, I remember talking to one of the company couple of, I think, years back now, one of the mobile company that folded. So, and he was saying, hey, Vishal, we were meeting all of our numbers. Like we were hitting all the numbers. We were killing it. Like we were just growing, but the market itself changed. So I think, so whenever I hear this story of, hey, we are doing great, I say that's not what's going to hit you. What's going to hit you is something that you have not seen, because you are going so fast, and maybe the thing that a turn that you missed, that could have exploded your sort of speeds. But you are, I think, but yeah, rightly said. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that.
Yeah.
So,
and I think to add on that, okay, for those people who are diehard, people who don't want to change, I always ask them this question. Okay, do you want to be the next Kodak or Nokia or BlackBerry? So, do you want to be the next Kodak, Nokia, or BlackBerry? So once I ask this question, they say, okay, so I see what you mean, Dickson. Okay, so yeah, maybe you can give it a try, right, for those people who are resistant to change.
Yeah.
So you can ask them that question.
That's interesting. So now let's take this framework. So what made you comfortable that this is the future? Like, so okay, sure, this is a great idea, that it definitely helps me recruit some interesting ideas. Probably I'll not see next $1 billion idea fall through the cracks. But what gives you that comfort that I think, because your title says it's edging over robots, right? So what is giving you that comfort that this would be a sustainable recipe for future?
Oh, sure. The assumption in this book is robots will be able to take most of the tasks, especially those like programmable tasks and routine tasks, from human being. Okay, now of course some people may argue that, okay, robots starting to learn to be more creative because of machine learning or other things. Okay? But it takes some time. It takes some time. But immediately robots will be able to take almost all of the programmable routine tasks. Then that means, as a human being, as a professional, okay, we need to really go up the value chain fast. That means we have to move ourselves out of those like a programmable routine tasks and focus our energy and effort on creative and innovative tasks. Okay, so that's the assumption, and that's the theme of this book, right? So if you look at it as like a triangle, right? So tip of the triangle is creative and innovative tasks, right? Which is the human being should aim for. Then the bottom of the pyramid, or middle of the pyramid, or middle of the triangle, are those like a programmable routine tasks that can be outsourced or easily taken by robots. Okay. Now, in order for a professional to move from the bottom of the triangle to the top of the triangle, they need some methodology and they need some help. And that's why I wrote this book, because they might think that, oh, they don't know how to move up to the creative and innovative tasks. Okay, so that's why in this book, okay, I put in a very simple 3I model. Okay, they need to focus on the individual mindset, they focus on the infrastructure, and they focus on ideas to help them to move from the bottom of the triangle to the top of the triangle.
Interesting. And say, if I am not employed yet, so if I am an individual who's just maybe graduating out of college, or I am in the middle of jobs, how would I read this book? It's because I don't have infrastructure in place. Like I don't have sort of ideation. Like I'm the only guy that works on myself. Sure. So how do I read this book?
Sure. This book, the target audience of this book, not just about the business organization leaders or managers. So the target audience of this book, there are twofold. Okay, one is about people who are actually inside an organization, inside company, which is more like a B2B focus. Okay. The other type of the reader of this book is more of the B2C focus. That means more like an individual, more like a solopreneur or someone who wants to start a business. Okay, this book equally applies to those people who are starting out. Now, if you are starting out, you want to do a business. Okay, creativity is even more important because you don't have your colleagues or organization for you to fall back on. Now, how you can apply this creative 3I as an individual? When you are starting your own business, I would say you can first develop your own creative individual mindset. That means you probably need to develop some personal habit so that you will be able to think out of the box. You will be able to embrace uncertainty. You will be able to be very comfortable when changes happen. Okay, so this is the individual mindset. That is even more important if you are starting out on your own, because you are going to face a lot of uncertainty. I guarantee you, if you're starting out. So first, you need to work on your individual mindset. And secondly, it's about the infrastructure. Now, for a solopreneur, right, you may argue that, there's no such thing called organizational infrastructure or so-called like the team infrastructure. But nowadays, right, the concept of the team infrastructure is quite fluid. That means your team might not be necessarily your own teams inside a company. Your teams could be your collaborator on Upwork, on LinkedIn, or someone or your supplier from China or your supplier from Brazil. Okay, so now we are talking about some things happening on a global basis. So even though you are not working inside an organization, you still have your infrastructure. Your infrastructure could be your online platform. Okay, so the infrastructure part still apply if you are starting out as a solopreneur or entrepreneur. Then, of course, on the ideas part, if you are starting out, you really need to have a lot of ideas. So people saying that, probably you need to have like 100, 200 ideas, right, before you can boil down to a few ideas that will match your personality, or match your business demands and things like that. So I think the more ideas you can come up, the higher chance you will be able to get those business ideas who works for you. So for solopreneur individuals, this book still apply, and they can still apply this 3I model.
That's pretty cool, and I think definitely a very clever model by the way, Dickson. I think the 3Is. Now I'm getting a sort of hang of it. It's pretty cool. So now we're at the tail end of our conversation. So I think I want to spend some time on your journey as an individual. So if we talk about, say, some of the tenets that has helped you achieve whatever you have achieved, what are some of the things that you could sort of that you could suggest our listeners and viewers, that something that really helped you achieve, like stay with you to become what you have become?
Oh, sure. I think it is about two things. One is embrace the future. That means you have to think. You have to think ahead. Could be 1 year ahead, 2 year ahead, 5 year ahead. Doesn't matter. But you have to think ahead. That means you should not focus on the past. Whatever it works in the past or whatever it's working right now doesn't matter tomorrow. So I think this is one of my firm belief is focus on tomorrow. Not yesterday, not today. Focus on tomorrow. So tomorrow will be a better day. So that is one of my philosophy. And my second philosophy is, in the future, it is not about the depth of your knowledge or your depth of expertise that matters, but it is about the breadth and your network. So that's why I always encourage people, especially young people, try to work in different sectors, different jobs, meet with different people, meet more people out of your industry. So because I believe that in the future, it's not about the depth, but it's about the wide network that you have that really matters. So to recap, number one, focus on the future, not the past. Number two, focus on the breadth, not the depth.
Beautiful. I think that's thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think that's pretty cool. And we ask all of our guests to share some of the books that they have read with our listeners and viewers. Like do you have any books that you would recommend and then you like reading and to our viewers and listeners?
Oh, okay, sure. I enjoy reading this book, called The Creative Economy. The Creative Economy by the gentleman called John Hawkins. It is not a new book, but the key principle in this book, still valid right now, and I believe it will be even more relevant in the future. Okay, so basically, one of the key ideas from this book is, people with ideas will have more power, will become more powerful in the future than people who own machines and other resources. Okay, so that means people who have ideas, who own ideas, will be more powerful than people who own machines and all other resources in the future. Okay, so that is the gist. That means that for those who want to embrace the future, I would say try to accumulate ideas, try to own ideas, because one ideas can make you go really, really far. Okay? So, for example, if you look at Uber, 10 years ago, there's no such thing called Uber, right? But Uber revolutionized the transport industry around the world. Okay, so if you look at Uber, it's one idea of connecting the IT system, or your mobile phone system with the transport provider, right? So basically, Uber is about the ideas of connecting your mobile phone with the vehicles available. Okay, that's the one idea. So you don't need to have many ideas, but you just need to have one idea, and that will make you million and zillion. So I would say people who own ideas in the future will be more powerful. And if you want to know more, you can read this book called The Creative Economy.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So now, last but not the least, so if you want our listeners and viewers to take away something from the conversation besides getting your book and reading the wonderful 3I framework, so what would you suggest our listeners and viewers to take away? What would be your closing remark?
Oh, sure. I think if they want to learn more about what's going on in the future, they are most welcome, right, to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Okay, and I'm sure you will include a link somewhere. Somewhere. So I have a strong passion, right, to help people to prepare for the future, right? So feel free to connect. Feel free to connect with me, and let's share more ideas along the process. Okay. Then of course, if you're talking about the website, you can go to my book website, which is the dicksonleader.com, and you will be able to get some resources about this book as well.
Awesome. With that, thank you so much, Dickson, for coming to the podcast. You're always welcome back to share, hopefully, the sequel of the book or maybe your next book. So wish you nothing but success in your journey, and thank you for spending your time and sharing your 3I insights. Maybe the fourth I should be insights with us.
Sure. Happy to do that. And once again, thanks for having me here today, Vishal. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on the